Hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar show that talks about all things essence. We gather around the campfire together and we share our stories of connection to that which is bigger than us, to our higher self, to the great creator, the great spirit, God, source, universe, purpose, passion, whatever that is for you. And we share those stories and we're illuminated, we are inspired, we are in remembrance of our own uniqueness and wonderment as we hear everyone else's stories. So this is so exciting. I'm so excited to bring you another episode of Soul Nectar Show, and I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird. And I love to help people take that journey into that next part of their sacred journey, the walk across the threshold where there's a lot of fear, right before the threshold, like, oh, I'm going to go across the threshold and everything's going to change and I don't want my life to change. But then actually you really need to change because you know that that is what brings joy and happiness is through the evolution of our being, and things don't stay the same, and if they do, that's called stagnation. So really excited to do the work that I do in the world, and got some group circles coming up this January teaching Reinvent Yourself. So if that resonates with you, please go to my website and check that out. In the meantime, I'm really excited for today's guest. We're going to have a very juicy conversation, very exciting conversation. So becoming a badass in life and business requires you to stand in your power and be super comfy with being unique. And my guest today is Dana Pharant, and she knows all about standing out and being unique. Her personal brand of the Inner Dominatrix, yes, I just said that, Inner Dominatrix, pushes people out of their comfort zone, challenges their preconceived notions, and has them stepping out into fierce determination to rock their bold, sexy, fun-filled lives. Yes, we're going to have an awesome show today. Of course, I love Dana, otherwise I wouldn't have invited her on my show. And so welcome, Dana. Thanks for being here with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Carrie. I've been looking forward to this delightful conversation we're going to have.
So
Yay!
juicy.
I know.
Okay, so you've had a really interesting path to awakening that would, some people would not expect your pathway
Mhm.
to awakening. So can you tell us a little bit about how you came into your true purpose as the teacher of this Inner Dominatrix work?
I would love to. So strap in. It's a bit of a story. We need to kind of give a bit of context here. So I grew up in a cult, and like most cults, there's always an abuse level that happens with it, and so that was part of my path, was that I got to experience various forms of abuse, including sexual abuse. And after I left, I went on this journey to try to heal that. And so I went through the typical group therapy and, social worker and psychologist and all of those things. And I was trying to get things to change. And I got to the point where it was like, well, I was kind of functioning. I had been managed to put myself through college and started a business and got married and, even had a cat. This is my joke, right? So even had a cat, yay!
Even had a cat.
All of
big
that.
accomplishment.
Big accomplishment, yeah. But there was still something missing in my life. And so I was just kind of like going through the motions. And then one day I had a client come to me. And so I should kind of back up. One of what I studied was to become a massage therapist. And so I had this client come to me, and she disclosed at the very outset that she was involved in kink, which is the BDSM, think 50 Shades of Grey. And this sparked something for me. I was like, what is that? Like, I need to know more. And she was this wonderful, still is, she's this wonderful woman who openly shared. We talked, we had philosophical discussions. I mean, we could have been discussing fine wine and, and yet we're discussing kink and all the different aspects. And it took me about 9 years to finally go into that world and explore. And I had the most incredible opening. So I did not expect this, but what happened for me was that I was able to recreate some of the abuse that I had experienced. Only because everything is scripted in the kink world, we were able to also script a different outcome, and an outcome that left me feeling empowered and allowed me to just unravel and untangle all of that mess that had gotten locked in my body. And I didn't even know the extent of how it was affecting me until afterwards. So afterwards, I remember sitting and looking out, over the Don Valley Parkway in Toronto. I'm looking out and it's this gray, drizzly day that normally I would have been like, right? But I look out and I'm like, wow, isn't that pretty? And then the other part of my brain's like, you have never had that thought, never in your life. And it's at that moment that I realized, you know what? I had been depressed for a good 20 years. And this experience in the kink world had allowed me to break free of that and to really start to connect with who I was at the core. And so my journey continued where, I wanted to take other people on this, healing path. And I learned to become a dominatrix and to actually hold that space for them to also untangle and heal and, reconnect with who they are. So for me, that time was really a big part of my spiritual awakening. Like it cracked the door open in a way that I never expected. And yet there I was, really faced with, who am I and what happens outside of ourselves and what's this connection and what is energy? I could connect to energy on a much deeper level. Now, since then, I've left the kink world, but I continue to explore energy and I continue to explore the consciousness and dropping into our spiritual path. So that's the big story in a tiny nutshell, as small as I can make it.
I love that. Wow, how beautiful and empowering. And it's also really, well, it sounds unique that it's through
Mhm.
sexuality, but I've learned on my journey that sexuality is so tied up in personal power. Like they're
Mm.
so entwined. And if you have any kind of like sexuality blocks or things with that from your life that were traumatic that you still haven't resolved, that actually impacts your whole life. Like you can't not deal with that. Like that was a double knot, but you have to actually deal with it. It's sort of like, and
Yeah.
it is actually a double knot. Sexuality not dealt with is a double knot.
It is.
It's a big problem. Did you know, I shared this before on the show. I don't think I shared this with you personally yet. I didn't actually ever have an orgasm until I was 38 years old.
Wow.
That's how repressed my sexuality was from all the messaging in my
Mm.
family and the early trauma and all of that. Is like, your sexuality is bad. Don't touch that thing. Don't
Mhm.
be, don't explore that. It's not safe. That'll make you just like your natural father who we left because he was deranged. And, this whole story evolved that really injured my sense of sexuality. And it wasn't until I reached this point in my life at 38 where I was so sexually frustrated and I didn't even know it, that I would act out in all these ways because I think a lot of it was sexual frustration. And I finally got invited to this, my former husband, the father of my children, actually tried to get me to explore that. And I just wouldn't, like I will not go into a sex shop because they're going to put me on the camera and then they're going to know that I like sex. And I'm not going to be one of those people that likes sex. So like, I'm not going into that store, right? And like, a friend of mine was doing the slumber party thing. I don't know if you know about the slumber parties, but they have the toys and then you go to the party
Mhm.
and it's supposed to be not threatening. And then you can go in the back room and touch the toys and, get familiar with the whole idea of it. And so she finally coaxed me, forced me to go to that. And I actually got a toy, and that's when the Pandora's, like, the whole thing opened up. And then I ended up leaving my former husband. So talk a little bit about like this binding, this sort of like early trauma and PTSD and the binding that it has with our sexuality, and how we can start to untangle some of that.
Mhm. So when we're in fear mode, which is, the PTSD, so we have incidents that happen and we are not safe. And then our reptilian brain goes and labels that, says, okay, this kind of situation is not safe. We must react in a way that, we're getting out of there. Our body engages all of the stress hormones, the fight or flight response. And at that point, you can't experience joy. You can't experience ease in your body. And if you can't experience those things, then you can't drop into orgasm. Now, sex and sexuality is not something that I I typically get into, but just feels important for today. But it's like this piece of, when we haven't dealt with our stressors and they're still locked up in our body, then we're cutting off all of the juiciness, all of the good stuff that can happen. And that can show up in not being able to orgasm, because in order to orgasm, we have to kind of lose control. We do. We lose control. And when it's not been safe for us to be, to be open and vulnerable, then how can we experience that level of joy when it's not safe? So we need to start changing that programming that's at the base level, changing those responses, the conditioned responses to situations, so that we can start to experience more joy and start to actually, open up to it being more than just I'm just going to get through life. I'm just going to cope, right? To go beyond that piece and actually experience some joy.
What's so interesting is I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about your story and the fact that you're, this inner dominatrix, is that my strategy for coping with all that was to like wall it off, right? To be in
Mm-hmm.
total control of it, which was
Mm-hmm.
like, it's not happening. Like, I'm not letting that happen, right? I
Right.
am not going to be vulnerable. I'm not going to let anybody close to me. I'll do the obligatory, like, lie there and, wait till it's over kind of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I will not enjoy this. Like, and that was a lot of my life. Like, I will not let myself do this
Yeah.
thing. And finally, it drove me a little bit crazy, to the point where then I had that opening where I was able to sort of start this process. And now I see in retrospect that there's actually greater control in the surrender. Like, I don't know, control is not the right word. There's greater power. Like, there's greater power in being able to
Mm-hmm.
surrender and be vulnerable. It's the opposite of what I originally thought. I originally thought power was controlling my experience, like controlling my vulnerability, like walling it off and not letting people in, or only letting people in a certain way. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was control, sort of like my ego managing all the situation. But now, years later, after a big spiritual journey, I realized that power is actually surrender. Like, power is surrendering to that greater me that is always present and loving, and that I can lean back and trust that greater power.
Yeah.
And in the trusting of it, I dissolve into it, and then in dissolving into it, I become the greater power. And so that is more power than trying to like control it from my little personality self, right?
Yeah, I love that. And I'm so glad you brought up the word surrender, because that is one of the big things, the big pieces that I learned in, on the submissive side of things, was learning to drop into surrender. And yeah, there is so much more power, if you want to call it power, when we let go of control, because like trying to control everything is kind of like trying to hold back a river, right? You are constantly, and it is
Takes
impossible.
a lot of energy to try to.
Take, yeah.
I always think about ice. What is it, Ice Age? And to have like the little guy that wants to find the
Oh
squirrel,
yeah.
whatever he is, and he's got the nut, and he's trying to plug up all the little holes, and then more holes open up, and then he's trying to plug. That is kind of what I felt like in my life previously.
Yeah. And that's what happens when we try to control from our ego, from the human perspective. But when we, can kind of surrender and intertwine our energy with the collective, then we can start to go with the flow. And as you start to go with that flow of what's in your best interest, it's easier. Life gets easier, and it gets more like you actually experience deeper emotions, deeper range, more ease, more joy, all of the things, and less trying to plug up all of the holes and drive yourself crazy in doing
Yeah.
it.
And it's like a magical mystery ride now, for me anyway. Like, the more I let go, the more I discover, and it's been a gradual, right? Because I think that it takes
Hmm.
a while, especially if you've had some early PTSD stuff in your life. It takes a while to unweave those patterns of distrust that are formed in your
Absolutely.
brain, and it takes a while to go, okay, this is safe. It is safe to relax and enjoy myself. Okay, this is going to feel good. Okay, the fear is only an automated response from the past. That's like an echo from my past, and I can step through the fear knowing with my knowing that on the other side of the fear is more love, is more joy, is more opening, is more beauty. If I can really just trust that the fear is an echo of the past, right? It's like
Mm.
something in my brain that's just echoing around like a pinball.
Yeah. And I love taking the analogy of, so great to have somebody, good spiritual conversation, because so many times
Yeah,
people don't want me to go that deep. I'm like, yes, let's go.
let's
But
go.
this idea that when we really expand out beyond, what our physical being is, and we move more into the space of like, hey, what if our human experience is just a game? What if we're here, we're playing, we're dancing, and it's not this big, heavy, significant thing that everybody wants to make it out to be? Then we can immediately shift into a different perspective. So it's not fear per se. And this is the fun thing. I love, shifting people on this, that fear, anxiety fear, like not real fear. So real fear is the tiger chasing you about to eat you. That's real fear. Okay.
Yeah, you're
Let me
actually
get a
getting
gun to your
chased
head.
and it's
Right.
going to
That's a
kill you.
real fear.
That's
Yeah.
real.
But the panic of like, I won't pay my bills or whatever, that's anxiety fear. Anxiety fear and excitement are physiologically so nearly identical that you can pretty much call them identical. They're kind of like identical twins. A mom can tell them apart, but they're really the same. And so oftentimes we mislabel it. We call it fear when it's actually excitement. And if we just change the label, if we can do that one little thing and say, well, what if it's excitement and not fear?
Yeah, what if it's excitement that I'm about to, because so many times I've had excitement right before I go to a retreat where I'm going to have a huge shift.
Mm-hmm.
And part of me is like, oh, like this is so exciting, and it can
Yeah.
make me want to think like, oh, maybe I shouldn't go. Like it can trigger thoughts in my brain like, oh, maybe I don't have time for this right now, or oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's. And all the excuses come up, and this is what people go through when they want to talk to somebody like you or me. All the excuses come up in the brain
Oh,
like,
I know.
oh, I don't have money for that right now,
Yeah.
or oh,
I
I
don't
don't
have
have time,
time,
or
or
I don't
yeah.
have time, I'm too busy, or I cannot have my life fall apart right now, so because I've got too much going on and it's all really important and I got to keep this train going on, the track, and all
Yeah.
that stuff that your brain tells you, when actually it's the opposite. Like you need to go to that thing. Like you need to get your butt there, because on the other
Yeah.
side the excitement truly is, it's like your soul going, yes, finally we're going to get the
Mm-hmm.
breakthrough.
Yeah.
Finally, it's going to be love. Yeah, more love.
Yeah. And really, if you're in that perspective of, we're here having an experience, why wouldn't you want to have all of the experiences? And why wouldn't you lean into that transformation of like, oh, cool, something different, something new? And granted, like this is not, I got to this place instantly overnight, like suddenly like, oh, being the light bulb went on. No, I've been doing this consciousness work for 20 years. So keep that in mind. Anybody's listening is like, cut yourself some slack, but keep moving in that direction of like, what if this could be a little more fun? What if it's not, fear, really? Like if we start nudging that and lean into, I love leaning into the pain. And that's of course my stuff from the dungeon, right? Like lean into the pain and you can actually transform it into something pleasurable.
Yeah,
And
when
that's
you
our life.
lean in, I like that. When you lean, my experience also has been that when I lean into the pain or the discomfort or the
Mm-hmm.
unknown or whatever word you want to use for it, right? The fear of the unknown, the anxiety in my body, I'm labeling it anxiety, whatever that feeling in my body of discomfort. Whenever I lean into that and I hang out there and I go forward another step, I like to call it the edge. But to go to the edge and I just kind of look down, you know, and go, okay, there's the edge. That's uncomfortable to stand here at the edge and look down, a sheer drop. Yeah, that's so uncomfortable. But then as you stand there and you just be with yourself, feeling your feet are on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going anywhere. You're fine.
You're just
You're
feeling it.
just standing next to a big source of power, which is the edge.
Mm-hmm.
And every edge in our life has power.
Absolutely.
It's like if you go to think about a cliff that you've been to where you've walked close to the edge of the cliff and have a sheer drop. right? And as you get closer to the sheer drop, you feel the energy rise around that edge, right? Like you feel it's palpable.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real thing. Edges have power. This
Yeah.
is one of the teachings I got from Jose and Lena Stevens. But it's so interesting when you get close to the edge, how much power it has. You can palpably feel it. And every edge in your life has that kind of power.
I love it.
So can you get
Absolutely.
excited about being close to the edge? Like you're like, oh, great, I'm about to up level. Like there's power here. Awesome.
Yeah. And I love inviting people to, just expand out what they're perceiving. So sometimes we get like very narrowly focused on this one emotion. Oh, I'm in fear, right? And they just like narrow in on that one piece. You've got the blinders on. But if you take the blinders off and you start saying, okay, what else am I feeling? What else am I feeling beyond that? What else am I feeling beyond that? And we start to like, move out so that all the spectrum of all of the emotions, because we have all of them at the same time, one just kind of comes into focus, but we still have all the other ones. And when you start, pulling back and having that greater perspective, then when we get up to that edge, you can feel that rise of like, yay, as opposed to, it's a different reaction or response to it.
Yeah, and don't you think, well, my experience of that big power is that I realized part of my reluctance towards it at first was this early childhood programming, because adults have a lot of power when you're a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So that big scary edge is like a 6 foot something tall man that, you know, was my stepfather, for example.
Yeah.
And when I started to face that and be with it, realizing that fear, that sensation of fear is coming from my inner child, not coming from my adult, that I could be in relationship with that edge in two different ways. Like I could get close to the power and my adult could be super excited, like, yes, more power, more personal power, more
Mm-hmm.
experience, more excitement, more thrill, more, joy, love at the other side. And my inner child could be like, oh, more power. I'm scared of that. More power. This, reminds me of this feeling of powerlessness.
Yeah.
Right. And so how can we make that bridge? And I think that you've done some of that work with your inner dominatrix work, with bridging those two reactions to this
Mm-hmm.
this edge, this power.
Absolutely. And I see like and this is why I love the work that I do. It's that like you said earlier, right? Changing the programming. And so making those disconnects, which for me is the energy psychology tools. I find that's really, really effective. Those and energy tools for disconnecting the automatic responses. And the more that we work on disconnecting our automatic responses, and also, from my experience, disconnecting our automatic judgments of everything,
Ah,
right?
yes.
And to start, yeah, start,
Judgments. Ah,
yeah, judgments are like, yeah,
so
and it
not
can be,
helpful.
and it can be good judgments as well. Like you can lock yourself up with, I am a good person for this. That does the same thing. Anytime you like kind of lock yourself into either side of the polarity, you limit where you can go. And so taking yourself through that process where you really untangle all of these pieces and get to as much of a state of non-judgment, the better off you are, like the more peace you have inside. It's really incredible.
I want to speak to judgment for a second, if we can. I
Mm-hmm.
had, the more you do this work, it's awareness work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the more that you, whatever modality you use to get greater awareness of your inner matrix, your inner world,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is, do it. Because like you can get to this space of awareness. Like I got in a retreat recently where I did something out of turn. Like there was a process going on in the group, and I did something out of turn without realizing that it was out of turn. Like I felt inspired to share something at the moment that I shared it. And then in the middle of my share, I realized it was out of turn. And I had that awkward feeling that arose from my ego being called out for being wrong. Like got to experience myself being wrong while everyone was tuning into my share in the middle of my share. And then I got to claim it and move through it with grace and ease, and then come to a nice close, and then go inside and really reflect on what was happening in me. And what was happening in me was huge self-judgment. Like, I was punishing myself for being out of tune with the group. I was punishing myself for, for this being a sage and just, needing to share all the time. And I was punishing myself for taking spotlight on the stage when I shouldn't have been doing it. And like all of these rules, that were coming up, these rules in my rule book that I was breaking, and being called out for who I really am, and all of this stuff. And then and I was just staying really, really present with the whole experience, which was super uncomfortable. And through the other side of it, all of a sudden, this blessing came. And it was like my higher self saying, Carrie, this was all orchestrated so that you could face your self-judgment and see it for what it is. It's self-punishment. It was perfect. And I saw the beauty of it. I saw like, wow, my heart did call me to sing exactly at that time. It did. It called me to do that. Yeah. And then I did it. And in the middle of it is when I got to witness my self-judgment in full force. And then I got to make a new choice around that because I got to see it clearly. And it was so funny because later on when I checked with my husband was like, I thought your share was beautiful, and I didn't even know that you were going through that in the middle of your share. I had no idea that you were going through all that. Isn't that amazing how it's so under the surface, is under the layers, and we don't even witness it ourselves sometimes unless we get these unique opportunities to have it exposed and brought to the light. And then we can make a new choice. And my decision, my firm commitment was, I'm not doing that to myself anymore. I'm not beating myself up anymore.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's such a big piece for me with other people and for myself. I mean, that is my ongoing dedication, because I have spent decades beating myself up, being the person that was wrong. I mean, I lived with a narcissist for several years, and in that relationship, I was always wrong because there was nothing I could do that was right. And so I got into this pattern of making myself wrong and learning to untangle from that, which again, the kink world was great. Like you step in there and it's a lot about letting go of your own judgments, right? Like you have to look at what other people are doing and step out of the judgment and ask questions instead. Why do you like that? Why does that work for you? Without feeling like, oh, I have to do that now because I've asked them. So that process of like having more of a curious perspective, I then took that and applied that to myself as well. It's like, why do I like that? Why, what does this do for me? How is this working? And having that, that little softer approach. And I don't know, for me, it's the judgment piece is so much easier to untangle when you just say, fuck it.
It is what it is, and it was meant to be that way. That's kind of where I got, right? I was like, well, it's all divine. I actually felt an inspiration. I just followed the inspiration, and so therefore it's perfect.
Yeah.
And so
I mean,
what did
so
it give
many
me?
times. Yeah. So many times I have done things. I had one person, I went into severe judgment of myself for a moment. And because, what I had done ended up triggering her massively. And then, as we talked about it, we kind of unraveled. It was like, you know what? She probably would not have faced that had she not been triggered by somebody who was safe to be triggered by.
Yeah, safe container. Like I was in a very safe container.
Yeah.
I was in a very safe container with people who are very skilled with processing their stuff, right? And not projecting and that kind of thing. So they're able to just kind of hold that, okay, you're having a moment there. Okay, go through that. We love you. Come to the other side. That's the other piece I got from that was when I got the message that when I'm in self-judgment, and you can take this and apply, audience for yourself if it resonates. When I'm in self-judgment and I go through these like punishing myself things, and and all the environment would happen inside my body, changing emotions, and everyone around me could feel me doing this to myself at some level, like my family and people who care about me. It actually hurts them too. Yeah. And I'm doing that to myself. And I saw that. I saw, wow, when we're like, I'm the one to blame, it's my fault. I've been in that pattern as well. I've also been with, I don't like labels, but the same kind of pattern with like the narcissism kind of pattern that I had some exposure to in my life. And when we're exposed to that at an early age, we also adopt some of it. So there's sort of like this like really uncomfortable
Hmm.
process of disentangling from all of it, like within ourselves and without ourselves. And
Yeah,
and it's like it hurts everybody around us when we're engaging in it, when we're engaging in that self-punishment, that self-destruction.
it does. We prevent them from really engaging with who we are, who we truly are, and it prevents them from being fully connected. So it's sad in a way. Well, we're limiting our own joy and we're limiting their joy. We're limiting our abilities to connect and really feel the depth of all the human experience. And there's still nothing wrong with any of it, even
And
if
I
you
think
are sitting judging yourself.
it's kind of like the invitation is to realize that there's this massive orchestration outside of you that's happening,
Hmm.
and you're just along for the ride, even though you think you're controlling it somehow. And so if you can just relax into you're just along for the ride and you're acting from your heart in every moment with what's true, and then witness what's happening around you and be present with it without judgment, you can just be like, I like that word you use, curiosity. It's one of my favorite words.
Hmm.
With curiosity, then you can find out something new you didn't know.
Yeah.
And so talk about how that process, I'm imagining that's part of the process you go through with clients to help them step into their inner power. Like, what is the inner dominatrix? Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So I've defined it kind of more as an archetype for people because not everybody wants to actually dive into the dominatrix skills, the hard skills. So for me, she is an archetype that has no judgment of herself or other people. So this is what to strive for. And she can stand in this place of quiet confidence, quiet power. So it's not power over, it's a power with others. It's being of high level service because the dominatrix is about taking other people on this journey, holding a space, showing them that they are way more capable than they ever thought they were capable of. And that ability to hold that space, be so present, powerful, and yet vulnerable all at the same time is the inner dominatrix that I like to invite people to step into. And it's that process of releasing more and more judgments, dropping in and connecting with who you are, really dropping into the intuitive process and following it. So when you get those niggles, you actually follow it. And then the third level of it is this space of, none of this is real. We're, having a human experience, but we're far beyond that. We are beings, spiritual beings. And so reconnecting with, that big cosmos piece of it. So,
So I love all that. And I have a question though.
mhm.
So when I think about dominatrix, in my mind has been programmed, this idea of a woman with a whip. Like,
Yes.
I see that. So how does that relate to what you're talking about with inner dominatrix?
So that character that you see, that is one aspect. And yes, like there is this strong personality. Like within the dungeon, within an actual scene, there is that woman, with a whip or some sort of, instrument or having power over, but it's not. It's all negotiated. And the person who actually has all of the power is the submissive. And so you're pretending, you're holding this space so that the submissive can drop into that deep level surrender, what we call subspace, that deep level trance where nothing else exists. There's no time, no space, there's nothing except for the two of you. That's that spiritual experience. So Hollywood loves the image because the image is dramatic and, this stern woman in leather. But with that, which I love, is the soft. And so you've got the masculine, which is what most people present, right? On the outside, they present the masculine. But there's also all this wonderful feminine energy, which is about flow, it's about connection, it's about being highly tuned in and facilitating change. So to me, it is the marriage of the masculine and feminine energies, which we have inside of ourselves. And, so I've, teach people how to just kind of marry those two in your life and in your business specifically, so that things flow with more ease, because you need both. You need that energy of like the masculine get shit done, and the feminine may follow the flow and follow the intuitive niggles. So bringing them together.
I love that. I also feel like it's a great exercise for women in particular to consider some aspect of this exploration, of this inner dominatrix would be a woman being in her power. And it doesn't have to be a dominating over, as you were talking about.
No.
I think that's really that's the bad rap that women in their power have gotten, is
Right.
that they're trying to have power over men. And that isn't exactly true. I feel like that's more trying to have power with men.
Yeah.
And I think that in order to have power with, there is a way in which sometimes you've got to the pendulum swings. And sometimes it's, if we're way over here and always submissive and always going along and losing ourselves in the man, which I did for a good part of my life, losing myself in my partner, forgetting who I am, and I don't even have a voice anymore because I don't even know who I am, and I just
Same
become
here.
everything that he does, and I just do that. All the way over into screw you, I don't even want you men, you're gonna beg for me, right?
Yeah.
Take me to dinner, buy me stuff, and maybe I'll be nice. The sort of the other archetype woman that says I'm in control and you want my body and you want this and you want that. And so I'm going to make you pay for it. Right. There's that other woman. And then swinging into what? A place where I'm just me. I am me and I have a voice and I stand in my power and I'm soft and I'm fierce and I'm all of that. And it's all okay. I am what I am in any moment. Right.
Yeah.
And you have to respect me and buy me gifts and, or you don't, but I won't be nice to you if you don't. Just kidding.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go along with what you want over here, so it's kind of
we're all of it.
Middle ground. Yeah.
We're everything. And then how do we choose to show up? And I think and again, it speaks to, it's when we define, I am this submissive, passive doormat, or I am the hard ass, that doesn't let anybody take it, do anything, you lock in to one of those perspectives. But when you come around to say, okay, I'm going to clear the judgments on both sides, and you come to the middle, then you say, okay, well, I could choose to explore either option at any time, knowing that I'm not locked into them. So you might dance in being submissive and doormat, knowing that that's not who you are. It's not your definition. And you might dance on being, the hard ass, witchy bitch, right? Knowing that's not who you are either. It's just a moment of time, and you're dancing in it as opposed to getting locked into it. And I think that's a really big piece overall, is not getting locked into any, definition of who we are. It's who I am today, but who do I want to be in a minute from now, in an hour from now, in a year from now? Who do I want to be?
And this is the freedom that I think that we're looking for as women, is to have the full expression. And we invite men as well. But I think that, if there's anything I know about raising boys, is that they are pretty much steady. I didn't try to make them that way. They just kind of are. They're just like this. But now I'm getting the experience of having a daughter. My new husband has a daughter. And it's like this, you're just trying to get it to be a little bit more, but isn't that beautiful that it's like this? And I think instead of fighting it, instead of trying to make it like this other boy experience, which has some beauty, but it's kind of like this, instead of trying to make it like that, why can't we allow it to be like this? I mean, maybe the ocean gets to come and into shore and leave and come back into shore and leave, and we can give it permission to be what it is, this feminine energy.
Yeah. The flow. What is the gift of the flow? What is the gift of, rising up and down the tides, and, to see the beauty of what's different.
And I think that we got to lose our judgments, like you said, because we've got to start thinking like, I know who you are. And last week you were being really submissive and you gave me everything I wanted. And this week you're telling me what to do and you're like holding a boundary and you're not, therefore you're lying to me. Like you're lying about it because you aren't the same. No, I'm not lying. Okay. Like there's no lie here. Okay.
It's different. Everything's different. Keep up.
Just different. Like it just changed, and get used to change. Instead of thinking like somebody has to be one way all the time.
Yeah.
Like, can you just allow people to be fluid with what is happening for them in the moment and stop trying to pigeonhole them and put them in a box with a label?
Allow yourself to have that.
And allow yourself to have that too. The same gift of being changeable.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I reinvent myself pretty much every 2 years. It's terrible for branding.
Well, actually, I love reinvention. I had that same quandary because I was like, I kept putting out programs and getting inspired by something and putting out a program, and then like I didn't want to stay with it. And then I'd be like, well, I don't want, I'm done with that now. And then I'd be on with another one. And it got really challenging, right? Because I'm like, if you start something new in a business, like, and you got to bring people into it, and it takes a lot of energy to get the new clients into that thing. And I kept constantly restarting. So I was really glad when I found out that actually butterfly is my mascot. I was like, oh, I just teach reinvention. Cool. And then I don't have to stay the same at all. I can just keep changing if I want to, because I'm teaching how to change. And I think that's what we're doing now. And that is really like, we're moving out of that stuck place. Like it's going to be this way or the highway forever. Like till death do us part. I marry you forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And I promise I won't change ever so I can stay with you. Like we can't
it
do
feels
this
so
anymore.
painful.
It's so painful. We can't do this anymore. Like we've got to recognize and give ourselves the permission that we're evolving creatures, and we're we're at a time in Earth's history when we can evolve like constantly and get a lot of traction with that. And it's the level to which you allow yourself to be free from any kind of label, any kind of way of being that you defined and you characterized and gave it a name.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
We are totally on the same page. Absolutely.
Well, that was an awesome conversation.
Yeah.
I hope everybody out there enjoyed it. So tell us, Dana, a little bit about how people can work with you.
So if you want to go to innerdominatrix.com, you can find all my contact information. You're more than welcome to follow me on Facebook. So I am the only Dana Pharant in the world. So if you look me up on any of the social media platforms, you can find me. That's a nice advantage. And there's a group, there's a podcast, all following the same Inner Dominatrix or Dana Pharant.
That is awesome. And do you have a free gift for the audience today?
I do. So if you go to innerdominatrix.com, you can download a free chapter from my latest book. So that'll give you some nuggets for stepping into your inner dominatrix.
That's wonderful. So everybody, I just encourage you to really consider this idea. Consider some of the ideas that we explored today, and maybe just run an experiment. What if you, for 1 week, let yourself be exactly where you are in any moment? And if 1 week is too long, pick one day. Where like all day long, like if you saw something that made you want to cry, you just cried. If you saw something that made you want to laugh, you just laughed. If you felt like skipping, you just skipped. And you didn't like hold back. What if for one whole day or one whole week, if you can go all that far, that's the extra challenge.
That's a big challenge.
You just let yourself sort of do whatever felt right in the moment, not involving another person, hopefully. But
unless it's consensual.
Unless it's consensual. Let's do this experiment with you, yourself, and I, whatever, yourself. What would that be like? And then report back. Report back. You can comment on this broadcast on the website, soulnectar.show. You can comment on the YouTube version on YouTube channel. You'll have a link in the show notes, so you can comment on iTunes. But do the experiment and let us know what it was like. Like, what did you get from doing that? What did you understand about yourself? What did you feel? What was your experience? Because we're here to experience, right, Dana?
Absolutely. I love
Awesome.
it.
Yeah. So wonderful. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear more about your experience of this broadcast, any gold nuggets you got, anything that you're going to apply to your life today. And we'd love to hear about what you think about Dana's free gift. And I'd love to also invite you into community. You know, reinvent yourself. We're doing it. 2019, it's a big year for it. We're going to be doing group circles all year long. So consider that as well. You can visit my website at carriehummingbird.com. That's Kerri, hummingbird.com. And you can visit Dana at, what's your website, Dana?
Innerdominatrix.com.
Innerdominatrix.com. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for being with us. And Dana, I like to give kisses on the way out. So it's all consensual. We're just going to give kisses. So here, I'm going to blow some kisses out. You're welcome to join me. So much love to all of you out there, and we'll see you next time on Soul Nectar Show. Have a great week. Bye, everybody.